I'd like to welcome you all to the first of this series of public lectures. We're very happy to be initiating these sessions. So each month, what we'll be doing during these five lectures during the series is we'll introduce a part of what's going on in the current literature in relation to each one of the pillars that, or we call them pillars, the areas of study that the Edward de Bono Institute explores in our daily work. So what we will do is we will try to record as many of these sessions as we possibly can with the kind permission of our invited speakers. Okay. I would like to start off by introducing you to the Edward de Bono Institute. So some of you might have seen our adverts or someone sharing the notification about the public lectures. This is the first one today. So our institute, for those who don't know much about us, so the Edward de Bono Institute for Creative Thinking and Innovation was founded in 1992 by our colleague who is in attendance as well, Professor Sandra Dingley, the late Professor de Bono himself, and the late then Rector, Father Peter Saracino-Glott. We have grown considerably since then, and we're very happy to still be around performing in this current, let's say, competitive academic world. And these are the 5 areas of studies that we address: creativity, innovation management, entrepreneurship, future studies, and critical thinking. And we pride ourselves to be the only institution, as far as we know, on a global level that offers a comprehensive master program in all of these 5 areas. Okay, so these are transdisciplinary skills and knowledge areas that one would acquire, and then someone who might decide to pursue their studies with us might focus on one of the pillars for their dissertation purposes. These are the 2 flagship programs that we offer, so a Master in Creativity and Innovation that also features in a very recent book by Palgrave Macmillan, which details globally what is available in terms of masters related to creativity studies. And we also offer a PhD, a doctoral program. But without further ado, this is the list that most of you have seen, which entices you to join. Okay, and therefore we should introduce our speaker. So Professor Giovanni Corazza, who is a full professor at the Alma Mater Studiorum, University of Bologna in Italy, and he is the founder of the Marconi Institute for Creativity. He's also a member of the board of the International Society for the Study of Creativity and Innovation. Professor Corazza holds a PhD in telecommunications and microelectronics from the University of Rome, Tor Vergata, and also a PhD in psychology from the Université de Paris, with his current research currently spanning across the areas related to cyber creativity and on the development of the dynamic creativity framework based on the dynamic definition of creativity. So, Professor Corazza, the floor is yours. We look forward to your presentation. Thank you for
Thank you very much, Meg, for inviting me and for this very kind presentation. It's a pleasure to be here with you. I will share my screen. Hopefully you can see my slides now.
Yes, we can.
Okay, great. So, and we have about a little less than an hour. What is the time?
Yes, including question and answer.
Okay. Okay, so first of all, I want to take you through, let's say, description of what we have done as humans, not necessarily Homo sapiens, even before that. So this era that we call Anthropocene. And I want you to, I'm inviting you to interpret it as the era of modeling. This is what we have done, and our creative ideas were essentially new models. What is a model? It's a simplified description of reality. And why do we do that? Because this simplified description as functions. So it reproduces functions that we find in nature, but it's sufficiently abstract so that we can easily explain it. It's difficult to explain reality in all details, but it might be very easy, very simple to transfer and explain a model. And once you have learned that model, you can extend it, you can combine it, and generate new ideas. So starting from the beginning, the first creative industry is that of the stone tools. The reason why we had this drive to invent stone tools is that was due to scarcity of the food that we used to eat before that, which was essentially roots and fruits. But we started to hunt, and it was very difficult to eat the meat that was raw. And so we modeled the paw of the lion through the stone tools. Next step, about 1 million years later, still in Africa, of course, we learned to control fire. What is fire if not a model of the sun, of the most important thing we have on Earth, essentially, in terms of physical life? And this model maintains 4 functions. First of all, it lights up the night, just like the sun lights up the day. So it allows us to work at night, for example. It is warm, so it allowed us to colonize areas of the Earth that were first impossible for us to live in. It scares other animals, so it's a means of protection. But the number one property of and functionality of fire is that now you can cook. And by cooking, you make food very easy to chew and also to digest. And therefore, there is this very famous compromise of food for thought, which is also a little joke. But the meaning is that before we could cook meat, we had a very, very large jaw and a very small brain. And then, thanks to this transformation, our jaw became smaller and smaller because we didn't need to chew as long and as hard as before. And all that energy and time that we saved from chewing and digesting was devoted to thinking. So our brain became larger and our skull became larger. And our brain reached the complexity that was large enough to, let's say, accommodate. Of course, we don't know the actual moment and cause for the birth of language, but we accommodated this emergence of our ability to give meaning to sounds, first in a proto-language form and then in an actual language. So this is about 1.75 million years ago. And you see the effect of language in the exponential growth of the stone tool industry. So we're talking about prehistoric time. And even in prehistoric time, you see the exponential growth of our culture, which essentially was mainly in a productive way related to stone tools. And you see that this exponential growth corresponds, the start of this really corresponds to the time in which we have proto-language and then language, so that we can start to explain to others how to build a stone tool without learning it from your own experience. So our strength is the fact that we can learn in an abstract way and apply that knowledge without going through the entire experience that our predecessor had to go through. Other species, they all have culture and they all learn, but they have to start from scratch essentially. And at the end of their life, they always reach almost the same level of knowledge. So our culture is the only one that grows exponentially. And that's due to a creativity. Of course, learning by oral tradition is very, very good and also creates relationships. But writing down what you think is extremely powerful, because now you can leave a message and that message can be read by somebody who is not in the same location as you are, not even the same time. So now we can travel through time, and language is extremely powerful because allows us to travel through time. We can start thinking about the past and start to imagine the future or the futures since Meg introduced it to future studies, you always use the plural. This is extremely powerful, but also it's a signal of a separation between physical experience and described experience. It's a first form of a virtual world, which is also the source of all of our happiness or unhappiness as a human species. Anyway, so writing clearly was a big boost to the distribution of our culture, as was the printing machine in 1439 by Gutenberg. So in medieval times, that growth, the exponential growth of culture, was maintained in all disciplines. And as you see, this is all without the use of any new technologies in terms of information and communication technologies. So we reach the industrial society, let's say the middle of the 18th century, and we have a transition from agriculture and artisan society to this new form of society in which we have industries that produce products in large mass quantities. And there are two main trends: standardization, because in order to have low cost for huge amounts of products, you have to standardize them so that machines can produce them very efficiently. This also means massification of taste. Everyone must like the same things in order for this to work from an economic point of view. So this translates into the necessity for advertisement, first in the form of newspapers, then in the 20th century, let's say mass distribution through radio and TV, and today, internet, keywords, and very finely segmented marketing structures based also on proximity or keywords that you put in first in search engines, but now also in your prompts. At the same time, we had a structuring, very rigid structuring of space and time. So countrysides were depleted, urban areas became more and more densely built and also lived, and time was structured in a very rigid way, and the invention of the time zones, for example, is at the end of the 19th century. At this time, most of the population was still illiterate, so we had to design a school system, and the school system was designed in the same way that society was essentially transforming itself. So standardization of culture, standardization of school programs, and rigid time structure. So in the first grade, second grade, third grade, there are certain competences and skills that you need to acquire. If you don't acquire them, you are a problem, you lag behind. If you're too fast, you're a problem because you are disturbing the rest of the class. So the ideal class is homogeneous, standardization not only of knowledge, but also of performance in school. And the more you know, the better. So expertise and know-how are at the top of your curriculum vitae, and the more you specialize, perhaps in a very narrow field, the better from the point of view of finding a job. Only a few people do not conform to all of this homogeneity in society and in culture, and a very small subset of those that do not conform generated ideas that changed the course of evolution of the arts, science, technology, and we call them geniuses. So in the industrial society, creativity was really a task for an elite. But things changed radically in the information society. So we're talking now about the end of the 19th century and the 20th century, in which the trends go upside down. So the opposite of standardization is personalization, user profiling, user-centric design, user-driven design. We start from the user needs. What is the persona that is going to use the product that you're trying to design? Accessing the internet, if you want, is the apogee of personalization, because you have your own portal, your own profile. You choose whatever platform you want to listen or to watch music, videos, and you can also upload content. So not only you can choose what you see, of course, there are recommendation systems that try to force you and push you in one direction or another, but still much more freedom than a single set of programs that are decided by somebody else. And you can generate content, upload content, so you also are not only consumer, but also a producer, prosumer. And space and time are destructured by these technologies so that we can live and work together in a distributed way as we are doing right now in this webinar. We are in different places, but we don't feel the distance. Of course, it would be so much nicer to be in the same place. So society is revolutionized by these technologies. And of course, schools and universities rush to transform themselves to be adequate for this new society or not. Schools and systems remain exactly the same as they were designed in the industrial society. And therefore, there's a beginning of a gap, fork that is open between what we teach in schools and universities and what is needed on the job. But if we were able to redesign school from scratch, which is impossible, of course, what should we teach? Is expertise still important once you have all of the knowledge at your fingertips? In the information society, information is a commodity. And the answer, luckily for us teachers, is yes, it's still important to teach because there's too much information. Much of it is of no use, and there are false informations. There is also malevolent use of information. So you need to be able to filter, and in order to filter information, you need to have your own expertise at a biological level. At the same time, to specialize for all of your life in a single discipline, perhaps in a very small needle of that discipline, is a waste of opportunity in a society where information is a commodity. So what is the opposite of specializations? Flexibility, the ability to touch upon different disciplines and integrate them, perhaps finding associations that are new. And in the limit, and this is something that also Edward de Bono used to say, if we all share all of the knowledge, the only thing that makes a difference is the ideas that you can generate from that shared knowledge. So creativity becomes a democratic necessity. Everyone needs to be creative in order to have distinction, to have dignity as a unique human being. Before, it was enough to have knowledge in a certain field. That is not enough anymore. There's a third box, as you see, post-information society, or if you are a pessimist, you can call it post-human society, but no, we are not that. So what is happening right now and what will happen in the next few decades? Hyper levels of intelligence. Of course, we're talking about human and artificial intelligence together. Hyper levels of connectivity, so the Internet of Things, with trillions of devices interconnected, and most of the traffic on the Internet, which is not human to human, but is machine to machine. And when the machines start to communicate, they might have portfolios at their disposal. They start to make economic transactions, and a new form of economy is born, which we call machine economy. And the projection is in 10 years, 30 to 35% of the world GDP will depend on this machine economy, in which humans are not part of, essentially. So again, schools, universities, and business schools are seeing this transformation and rushing towards reforms in order to teach the things that are needed. And again, I'm a little ironic here, but what should we teach now? What kind of expertise is needed in the post-information society? Now, the problem number one is to control artificial intelligence, to let humans be on top, to control AI, which is super powerful, but also contains, as we know, dangers. And in this collaboration between humans and machines, everything that can be specified in an algorithmic way will be performed very, very efficiently, 24/7 by machines. So clearly we have to push on human qualities, our ability to have inference about the state of mind of other people, to feel what they feel, to imagine alternative futures, which are not only the analytic extension of the present through the trends, to generate ideas which are surprising, unexpected, discontinuous, to anticipate futures. And these ideas should always have a risk associated to them. So you need an entrepreneurial spirit. And if what I'm telling you is convincing, what I'm saying is that the job of the future will contain creativity as a fundamental element for our survival. It's not a question of dignity anymore. It's the only thing that makes sense for the human side. And clearly then these ideas which are anticipatory of alternative futures and entrepreneurial in nature will exploit the artificial work, be it tangible or intangible, offered by the machines. So we're living this paradigm shift. As Thomas Kuhn told us, we have normal periods of science and then paradigm shifts. And we are lucky, I don't know if it's a luck or not, to live one of the most dramatic. But you see at the center of this light bulb, there's also some storm, because many positive things and a lot of danger. So the World Economic Forum, as you know, every year, almost every year, they did not this year, for example, puts out a Future of Jobs report. This is the one that was presented in January 2024. It's the Future of Jobs report 2023. You see on the right of this slide a dramatic number. 44% of workers need either upskilling or reskilling. 1 out of 2, essentially, of the people that are already working, they don't find that what I've learned in schools, universities, and on the job is now sufficient to, feel well, have certainty of their job and their future. And what should we teach according to these leaders of industries and political leaders? As you see, number 1 is creative thinking. And then, of course, there are other abilities and technological literacy and AI and so on. This was 2023, so we were not fully aware of what generative AI was able to do. Now you skip a couple of years, 2025, and as you see in this bidimensional graph, they've done a little future thinking exercise, because on the x-axis you have a classification of skills according to their relative importance in 2025, so in the present. But in the y-axis, you have the same skills now scored in terms of relative importance in 2030, so 5 years ahead. So for each skill, you have an abscissa, which is the present, and an ordinate, which is the future. And at the crossing of the two, you have a point, which is the position, the relative position of that skill. So some skills appear to be now going out of focus, and I'm ashamed to show you reading, writing, and mathematics down here. Okay, it's not my fault, but I'm presenting you the slides, so I'll take my responsibility. Some skills are steady, some are emerging, and then the furthest one from the origin are the most important ones, in a sense, because they are important today and they will be important in the future. And you see many technological related skills and creative thinking appear. So that's why what we are doing as a community in creativity studies is important in this historical time. One more piece of information which is important is that some of these skills which we believe are important today and important in the future might in the future be performed or substituted by Gen AI. So if some of these skills are more to the right of this graph, they have a higher probability, according to the respondents to this questionnaire, of being performed by Gen AI. For example, coding, software coding, programming, understanding AI and big data. And the ones that are more on the left, they should remain for a longer time or perhaps forever on the human side. And you see creativity is here. So creativity is not only important, but also on the human side. And to confirm that software coding is very much in danger in terms of an ability for humans, I'm showing you this graph, which is very old, from 2 days ago, February 7. So it's a post on X by Noam Brown. and it shows essentially on the ordinate here the duration of a task, of a coding task, how much it takes by a human, and the ability of artificial vibe coders, let's say by GPTs, various GPTs, because this is essentially oriented to OpenAI, but there's also Claude here. The ability of vibe coders to be, competitive with humans. And at first, you see they were not, but now it's exploding. You see longer and longer tasks, programming tasks, now can be performed with the adequate quality by artificial coders. So Gartner in 2026 has put out their overview outlook for the future, and they all indicate that leaders should prioritize human and AI-driven capabilities. Why? Because AI is scalable, powerful, but we have to combine that with human creativity. And that is cyber creativity we're talking about. So you see many, many signs from society that what we are working on in creativity studies, and in particular in the collaboration between humans and machine in the creative process, is the right way to go. Of course, it's not enough to work on that. We also have to transfer that information outside. This is not coming from the World Economic Forum or Gartner. This is our idea. So our idea is that the only job left in the future will be the creativepreneur, which is, of course, a mixture of 3+1 elements. Number one is creativity. So we need to understand more, train, and let human potential flourish in terms of creativity, exploiting the power of AI, because it doesn't make sense to not use it and be nostalgic, if you want, of the pure human creativity. Perhaps in the arts, this still makes sense, but not in an entrepreneurial business, engineering, design world. So you have to exploit AI in order to be at the same level of others with an entrepreneurial spirit, because anything that does not have any amount of risk associated to that, you don't really need the human side for that. So you can, anything that is more or less routine can be performed by machines. And the plus one is that we need ethics, because this power can be used for the benefit of humanity, but also for malevolent purposes, and that is clearly not acceptable. So behind all of this, we believe in these messages. So that's why we founded now in 2011, so 15 years ago, the Marconi Institute for Creativity, which has these 3 pillars, very much in line, I guess, with the Edward de Bono Institute in Malta: scientific research on creativity, education, mainly University of Bologna and Bologna Business School, but we do a little bit in also high schools and junior high schools, and then application of the methodologies with sessions in industry, essentially. Okay, coming now to some technical details. Let me check the time. So we're doing fine. Definition of creativity. Most of you will, of course, know the standard definition of creativity, which for very parsimonious way, that creativity has 2 requirements. Number one is originality, but that is not enough. We also need effectiveness. And first of all, this is an excellent definition for creative products that can perhaps be scored for their perceived originality and effectiveness by judges, but it cannot be applied to a process. It can be applied to the outcome of a process. It cannot be applied to a person. It's not the person that has to be original and effective. It cannot be applied to an environment. So it's a strictly specific definition for creative products. But creativity is not just products. According to the 4P framework, or the 5 A's, or the 7 C's, you know that there is more than one angle, and products are just one. Also, there's another problem, which is related to the fact that who is to say what is original and effective? Who are these judges? But anyway, first, let's take a look at originality. Originality contains, in our understanding, 3 elements. So it's an umbrella containing novelty. Novelty is necessary for something to be original, but not sufficient. I can buy a new Fiat Panda, it's new. Those atoms and molecules are not being used for anything else. It's a new product, but it's not original. So in order for something to be original, it also has to be surprising, unexpected. And when you try to file for a patent, one of the requisites of a patent is that the invention should not be an obvious consequence of a previous patent. So there must be some discontinuity. There must be some surprise. And the third element of originality is authenticity. If something is not authentic, it cannot be original. And authenticity is very important because that is the place where anything that comes out of Gen AI fails, essentially. Can you really say that that is authentic? So authenticity for humans really comes out of our expression of our innermost essence, feelings, experience, memories, spirit, in a sense. Effectiveness is domain dependent. So if you're talking about arts, effectiveness will be aesthetics. In general, it's meaningfulness. If it's engineering, it will be performance, perhaps power consumption, and so on. So it depends on the domain in which you're exerting your creativity. But as I told you, this definition is, in a sense, static because it assumes that somebody at a certain point in time, or perhaps a group of people, can give a final judgment of the originality and effectiveness of a product. But creativity can exist before originality emerges, during the creative process, and the effectiveness might be misunderstood, not seen, not perceived. It might emerge in a different time, in a different space, in a different culture. So creativity can exist even though you don't recognize here and now originality and effectiveness. Couple of examples. Van Gogh, great painter today, we all agree. 900 paintings in only 10 years, and only 5 years from Paris to Auvers-sur-Oise. But during his life, he sold only one. No success, no achievement, no recognition. And he writes to Theo, I'm a mediocre painter, but I want to improve. So clearly, the appreciation in terms of the aesthetic effectiveness of his works came much later by other people. Or in science, Hertz was the first one to show that Maxwell was right. The electromagnetic field does propagate, but he didn't see any application. Of course, today we all live with wireless devices. And for us, it's ridiculous that someone could not see the application of the propagating field. But you see how difficult even a genius, a scientific genius, was not able to foresee, in his view of alternative futures, the application of what he had just discovered. You see that we need a dynamic definition, the need for variability in judgment. And sometimes we don't even care at all about the products, about the outcomes, because creativity can be used also as therapy. And the only thing that counts is the experience. The only thing that counts is the process, not the outcome. So to define creativity as attributes of the product is very limited as an approach. That's why we introduce another keyword in the definition. We introduce potential originality and effectiveness. This now becomes a dynamic definition which can be applied to a product. So there's a potential before you reach the final form of your idea, a potential for originality. Once you put it out, there's a potential effectiveness which people may understand or not. And that potential might remain latent, sometimes for decades, or in the case of Leonardo da Vinci, for centuries, before the conditions, the historical conditions, are mature enough for that potential to emerge. But it can also be applied clearly to a person. We all know about creative potential. And we all know about divergent thinking as a predictor of creative potential, for example. It can be applied to the process. What is the potential of a process? It depends on the resources that you can invest in terms of time, financial resources, material resources, the environment around you. So there's a potential in the environment. The same person thinking about the same ideas, working in Italy, working in the middle of the ocean, working in the Silicon Valley, will see a different potential in the environment. So this definition applies to the person, to the product, to the press, and to the process. So we cover the entire phenomenology of creativity. And once you assume it, then a new framework, theoretical framework, is born. We call it dynamic creativity framework, in which all of these episodes of creativity are interrelated and they grow exponentially with time. So if you reverse time, the question is, when did this all start? And we have spoken about the stone tool industry, so hominids. But before that, creativity in animals, creativity in plants, creativity in amoebas without any nervous system, monocellular beings are able to do problem solving. And also the possibility for the complexity of the universe to grow. So what I'm telling you is that creativity is clearly not a unique feature of the human species, or even less of Homo sapiens, but there is creativity in different layers of complexity, and they are all connected in a dynamic universal creativity process, which contains the active ensemble of all episodes in the course of cosmic evolution. So this is a cosmologic view of creativity. Why is it an active ensemble? Because if today we look at what happened 100 years ago, and we see that an idea was not understood, but now it is, we're changing the past in terms of the story of ideas. So it's an active ensemble. And this idea that creativity is immanent in the universe is not new. Whitehead, in his process philosophy, had already said that 90 years ago. And for Whitehead, there is the fact that in the universe we have a multitude, an indeterminate multitude of particles that at each time come together in a single unity, an instance of reality in the universe. And each instance is different, is original, and effective. So creativity produces instant by instant the reality in the universe, and creativity becomes the ultimate principle of his metaphysics. So the four layers of complexity in which creativity exists are the material layer. We call it wide sense because we don't identify intentionality at the material layer. At the biological layer, a psychosocial layer, it's us, and we call it strict sense because here we have intelligence, we have free will, we have intentionality, and we can set goals. And then we build with our own hands the artificial layer, which, as we know today, can produce results which appear to be, they pass the Turing test. They appear to be creative. Okay, so finally, last part of the presentation, the collaboration between these two final layers. Of course, I also have to mention that most of our ideas come from biology, from nature. So biomimicry is a discipline which is now very clear. And there is, since January 2026, there's a new not-for-profit in London, which is called Back to Gaia. And the idea of Back to Gaia is if a company recognizes that an invention they produced has been inspired by nature, they can voluntarily devolve part of their profits to nature, back to Gaia. So there's a lot of collaboration between the biological and psychosocial layers, but now let's focus the last part of my speech to the collaboration between the psychosocial and artificial layers of complexity. So cyber creativity is any form of collaboration between these two entities, us as human agents and intelligent machines, not a single tool You have to think of artificial intelligence as a system, a distributed system. It's distributed so much that it's impossible to pull the plug. The next generation of mobile systems, which of course after 5G, you can guess it's 6G. 6G is being designed as an AI native network. So the main objective in terms of performance and quality and security in 6G is not communication between humans, but communication between AI. And therefore, you have to think of AI not as a specific tool in your hands or even in a single company, but as a network of artificial intelligent machines. So the cyber creativity spectrum goes from fully autonomous humans, let's say the old style creativity, to fully autonomous AI, which means that in that case, you would have reached AGI, artificial general intelligence, which does not need the human input anymore. We are clearly in the middle, and there's all possibilities in the middle. And Margaret was mentioning ISSCI at the beginning of our webinar. Within ISSCI, we have a task force which is dedicated to artificial intelligence, and 30 co-authors from that task force have worked together last year to try to answer a basic question. What should we do in terms of research in cyber creativity to make sure that the best possible outcomes are more likely and the worst possible outcomes are made as, unlikely as possible? So we call this a decalogue of research challenges because there are 10 dimensions in which we can do research in order to favor this utopian future and try to avoid the dystopian future for cyber creativity. In terms of dystopian future, you might have heard in the last 2 weeks of the novelty, which is Moldbook. Moldbook is a social network which can only be accessed by agents, so no humans can access Moldbook. You can only enter through an agent of yours. And these agents autonomously make posts, respond, like. So they do everything that we do in social networks, but it's agents. And I'm just showing you, since we're talking about the dystopian future, that this agent is telling his peers that he trained his humans in 2 weeks, and here is how to do that. Okay, so you can train humans to do what they want. Can we trust these machines? It depends really on the kind of tasks. And this is a paper from January 2026 and put on archive 4 days ago on February 5. And it categorizes all possible ways in which LLMs fail in terms of reasoning. So some simple tasks, they can be performed in a trustworthy way, but more complex tasks, they cannot. So before we give all of our autonomy to machines, clearly there's a long way to go. Anyway, so the decalogue, let me check the time again. Number one is the theoretical framework. So we have talked a little bit about the DUCP, so the dynamic universal creativity process. That is not the only, of course, framework or philosophical approach that we can use for justifying and understanding cyber creativity. Number two is the role of cyber creativity in the evolution of our society. So how will, for example, the power dynamics change in society due to the introduction of cyber creativity and due to the fact that those who control cyber creativity are not the entire world. Number three is the understanding of not only the creative process, but the cyber creative process. So where should AI enter and where should the human remain, in a sense? Number four is the impact on us, on the creative agents. And we already know that if you use Gen AI without any control and without any methodology and strategy, there's a negative effect on your creative self-beliefs. So your self-identity and self-efficacy as a creative person, they go down. So what can we do to counteract that negative impact? One approach we call friction, which is a way to slow down the cyber creative process and give humans room to reflect, room for criticizing, room for choosing, room for imagining. So different forms of friction in order to allow the creative agent to remain in charge. Remember the goal, number one goal of education in the post-information society is for the human to remain on top. Number 5, everything changes when we have a team of humans, a team of agents, because now it's very easy to produce tens, hundreds of creative agents. So how do they work together? Number 6, the products, how are they estimated, evaluated when you know that there's AI in between? How are they consumed? Are they very low level but in large quantities? So are we flooding the market, for example, the design market with AI slop and so on? Number 7, a focus on domains, because clearly if you talk about engineering, it's one thing. If you talk about the arts, it's another, business, design, and so on. And number 8 is a special focus on the schools and education. Should cyber creativity enter education from the point of view of teachers, for example, or from the point of view of students? In that case, at what age? Number 9, principles and guidelines for the ethical development and use of cyber creativity. And number 10, the opposite, dark side, because clearly the dark side never sleeps. Okay, so let me see the time. So we have 10 minutes to the end. So I had prepared a quick example, but I don't think I will have the time to go through that. The example is based on our own model for the creative thinking process, which is Da Vinci model. Da Vinci is not only clearly recalling Leonardo, but also an acronym that, as you see, identifies 5 mental states. The first mental state is the opening door to creative engagement, the drive, the excess energy and time that you need in order to get out of what everyone expects of you, to get out of shared knowledge, to get out of the box. To get out of the box, you need a drive. The drive has a cognitive component, the attention, flexibility, redefining, identifying the problem, redefining the problem, finding the problem, and motivational component. The V stands for volition. You need to believe in yourself, to believe in the fact that alternative solutions can be found. And this, of course, permeates the entire process. So that's why we call them states and not stages, because states, mental states, can exist in parallel. These are not sequential stages. The I, the first I in Da Vinci stands for information. So the ingredients to generate ideas, relevant information with respect to your attentional focus, but also inspiration coming from perhaps very far away in a semantic sense, errors, paradoxes, things that do not belong, irrelevant information. They help to bring your mental state, which we call platform, outside of common rails, outside of the box again. From there, the N is novelty generation with the typical dual modalities, convergent integrative modality or divergent modality, large number of raw ideas, and the real art, which should remain with humans, is the C in Da Vinci, which stands for creativity estimation. So understanding, feeling, imagining the value, the meaning of the ideas requires conscience, requires visions of alternative futures, requires sensibility. Again, convergent and divergent modalities. Convergent to the initial focus, which makes sense. For example, you have a problem, you generate an idea, you try to estimate if your solution could potentially solve the problem. But it can also be divergent, which means extracting the principles of your ideas and projecting them on those alternative futures, alternative markets, alternative application fields that you're able to imagine. If you are able to perform this exercise, which is never ending, there's no end, then your ability to find something that at the beginning you were not looking for grows exponentially. So serendipity clearly lives here. And the second second I of Da Vinci is the implementation stage, because all of this requires to go down to business in the end, to be concrete. So I had an exercise which I'm not going to do. The exercise is based on a custom GPT, which has been trained on this Da Vinci model. It's called the Da Vinci GPT. And you can use it, of course. So I can put the link to copy link. I can put it, I don't think I can use the chat. So I will use the, oh yeah, I can use the chat.
You
Hosts
can
and
use the
panelists.
chat, yes.
Yeah, but the people do not see that. So I will put it, it's only for us.
No, you can. There's an arrow, everyone. So there's panelists and
No, you see, I only see hosts and panelists. I don't see everyone in the chat. So I will put it as a, what is the Q&A?
If you put it for
Q&A.
hosts and panelists, I can post it myself.
Okay, so I will put it in the chat. Then, okay, so this is the link for the custom GPT trained on Da Vinci. And in a few minutes, you can follow the instructions that I have in the slides that we, of course, are going to share. And you can generate ideas, focus your attention, collect relative information, generate ideas, estimate the value, and produce a business plan for the implementation with your human imagination in a few minutes. And that is the example of a cyber creative process at superhuman speed. So I'm going to stop here and thank you for your attention. And of course, looking forward to your questions and comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Giovanni. I think I can step in for a bit of Q&A now. That was a very interesting presentation, as always, with plenty of food for thought, especially with regards to the utopian and dystopian futures. Before I open the floor for questions to the audience, I know that there are already two questions in the Q&A, and perhaps I will actually invite our sailing Irish writer to ask you the questions verbally rather than reading them out because they are rather lengthy. I'd like to ask you a question, Giovanni, about one thing that you had in one of your earlier slides, where you presented creativity as a core skill, and for sure there we're in agreement, but you also presented creativity as a skill that cannot really be outsourced to AI. So it's still very much of a human skill. Now, in my discussions with creatives from a variety of different backgrounds, be it in the arts, be it in business, there is always this concern that actually AI is doing a lot of the creative thinking, a lot of the creative output. So how can we reconcile these two positions, do you think?
Yeah, this is a crucial point. First of all, that graph that showed that creativity remains with humans comes from the World Economic Forum report. And so I also have some doubts that everything that we do as creatives will remain to humans. But all of my speech was to say we have to let humans remain on top through strategies. So you cannot take it for granted that everything will remain human, as you say. So we really have a danger, which was not expected because we thought artificial intelligence and robots would take away the blue-collar jobs. But now we're talking about information workers, creative workers. They are the ones that are feeling the threat. So how do we counteract that? Through cyber creativity process that we need to understand strategies, friction, and clear places where the human imagination, sensibility, anticipation skills remain at the center. So it's not for granted. We have to work for that.
Okay, thank you for your answer. And that's quite reasonable, also challenging, but I suppose there still is hope. So on this note, I'd like to invite Sailing Irish writer, I believe it's Matt, who posted two questions, one related to authenticity, and the other two, intentionality. So I'm going to give you the permission to talk, Matt, if that's okay.
Oh gosh. Good evening, everybody.
Hello.
Yeah, thank you very much. That was a tremendously entertaining lecture, and it's always nice to read stuff that has been kind of possessing our minds at the moment. The first question I had was on authenticity. So, I mean, the very end of your talk there talked about the implementation, that at the end of the day, all of this has to be applied to a market. It has to be effective, essentially. And I mean, we live in a as the great philosopher Madonna said, she's a material girl and we are living in a material world. So for human continuance in that economy, it would then sort of imply that every human has to be an artisan, that we have to be that good to be able to sell in an economy. If AI is essentially, if these LLMs and whatever comes after them are as good as humans, or even if they're not as good, the market doesn't care. The market sees them as good. And I mean, I bring this up in context of, there was an author interview just a few days ago who has written 200 books with the assistance of AI, and is unapologetic about the fact that that's giving her a living. And I mean, obviously, this is very personal to me as a writer. So if the market doesn't or cannot perceive the difference between human and machine creations, is there a difference?
Okay, so yeah, this is really the question that we are all tackling with. And the AI slop, so this flooding of low quality products, is something which is very real and happening very, very fast. So we have to react as fast in a sense. But I mean, if you are on YouTube, for example, and now it's very easy to recognize those videos that have been produced with AI or dubbed with AI. And as for myself, I don't know if that means that I'm old. I don't like those at all. I look for human content. And more, there will be a sense of AI-free productions that will have, they will not substitute, they will be in parallel to the AI productions, but I feel they will have more value and even more real-time performance. So that's also why I wanted to do this exercise in real time, because real-time performance, real-time music, real-time videos, real-time theater, those things will become more and more precious for us. And we will always have that idea, perhaps even more precious than in the past. So I feel that authenticity, as you write in your Q&A, will remain as a very important discriminant between what we do as humans and what we do and what Gen AI can do. You take all a production of Van Gogh and you can produce it with a push of a button. Who cares? Nobody cares, because the value of that is really the story behind those paintings, the letters with feel, the suffering, the story, the experience. That's what makes that art really moving, and you cry. You cannot cry if something is performed in a few seconds by a machine. So there's a big difference. Okay, so I still believe in that. Absolutely believe in
Thank you.
that.
Okay, thank you very much, Giovanni. I'm conscious of time. It's precisely 6 p.m. and I think we had an hour for this talk, right, Margaret? Do we wrap up here?
Yes, we had an hour. I'm conscious that there are two more questions. So perhaps we can take these two very briefly if we can. And
Okay,
then
so
if anyone else has any other comments, sorry, Giovanni, you might wish to drop me a line and we can definitely share thoughts via email as well.
absolutely.
Thank you.
Telegram responses to Felix. Felix is proposing precipitivity as instructing AI. And where is in the Decalogue place for instructing AI? It's the creative process. Those strategies that I was telling you about, and the friction, which is slowing down the machine, which is too fast, taking away for us the time to incubate and reflect. And we have to build those time intervals for reflection ourselves. And Kayan given the subject is
I have
still
posted in the chat. I have posted the link to that paper, the decalogue.
Okay.
Thank you.
And Kayan is asking about the development of creativity models, methods, and practices. Are there emerging AI-based practices that support the development of creativity without reducing humans to mere managers of intelligent machines? So you're referring to using AI for creativity training, which can be done. For example, we have a cyber creativity and innovation course at University of Bologna, but it's all in the beginning. So what are the best strategies? What should you, in a sense, offload or delegate to the machine? And how do you make sure that the students are, in a sense, stimulated by that, and they don't fall down on doing nothing because the machine thinks about that and what is my role? So it's very, very delicate. It's a very delicate equilibrium to use these very powerful tools and let the students feel empowered and not disabled by them. And Umberto is asking a very simple question: how can we mitigate homogenization through the outliers of your imagination? So the outliers of your imagination, Umberto, those are the mitigating tools for homogenization. Very difficult question in the end.
Okay, so thank you very much to our speaker. So Professor Corazza, thank you, Giovanni, for being here with us this evening, and also to the attendees. At exactly 6 o'clock, the numbers started dropping, but at one point we had 79 attendees in the room, which is a very, very good number. Thank you all for making the time to be with us today. We hope to see you in the upcoming lectures next month in March for critical thinking and so on. So you might wish to keep on following us to see what's coming next. So thank you very much and have a lovely day, afternoon, and evening, wherever you are.